Neither Iran nor any other hostile actor should mistake U.S. prudence and discretion for weakness.
Recognize that guy? If you've been anywhere near Washington in the last few decades, you've probably seen John Bolton around. Can't miss him, hits the mustache. Trump's national security advisor. He first entered federal service back in the Reagan era. That's a long time ago. I wasn't old enough to serve back then. During those years, America had two painful reference points for its dealing with Iran and its proxies.
Some 60 Americans are now beginning their 6th day of captivity.
We have a bulletin from the Pentagon on the explosion in Beirut at the U.S. Marines barracks. The Pentagon now estimates that 120, possibly more, 120 American Marines have been killed.
Since then, Iran has detained at least 25 American citizens or permanent residents, while adding to bloodletting in Iraq. The Pentagon estimates that during the Second Gulf War, Iran-backed militias were responsible for the deaths of more than 600 U.S. soldiers. That means that roughly 1 in every 6 American fatalities in Iraq were linked to Iran. Given that history, you might start to see Bolton's hardline perspective when it comes to the Islamic Republic. Of course, he was also one of the cheerleaders of that war in the first place, but I digress.
President Bush has said at the end of the story, Iraq will no longer have weapons of mass destruction.
Either way, diplomacy has never been Bolton's strong suit. He's known as the most hawkish guy in Washington.
John Bolton is absolutely a hawk. It's up to him. He'd take on the whole world at one time, okay?
We will no longer appease dictators and despots near our shores. Talking to the North Koreans is a waste of time.
The United States makes the UN work when it wants it to work. And that is exactly the way it should be, because the only question for the United States is what's in our national interest.
The only solution is to change the regime itself. And that's why before 2019, we here will celebrate in Tehran.
But we want to put unprecedented pressure on the government of Iran.
Trump has been on board with some of that, including U.S. withdrawal unilaterally from the Iranian nuclear deal and expanding U.S. sanctions on Iran. That's partly why Iran is now taking action. But when it comes to Tehran, President Trump is hesitant to commit forces in the way that John Bolton has suggested. Indeed, those that say that President Trump is interested in wagging the dog, starting a war to get focus on military enemies of the U.S. before elections, he's had many opportunities to do so, certainly with Venezuela, certainly with North Korea, certainly with Iran. Trump rhetoric has been very heavy, but he's then tilted towards diplomacy in the case of North Korea and Iran, and towards ignoring it in the case of Venezuela. One of President Trump's most consistent electoral platforms after building the wall was no new wars. Talked about how the war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq, not his idea, he was always opposed, were failed by other presidents, and he doesn't want to commit more forces into these countries. One of the things he disagreed with former Secretary of Defense James Mattis, and also doesn't want to start a new war under his watch. In that regard, America First actually does mean don't overthrow these regimes. John Bolton, on the other hand, who Trump has increasingly privately and publicly gone after for being too hawkish, has never seen a war he really doesn't like. That's created some conflict, a little bit of confusion and uncertainty as to what the Trump administration is ultimately saying, but eventually it goes to the president. The buck does stop with him. So far, that's meant no war with Iran.